Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Ready? 1. You will do this 4 times with the left, 4 with the right, then 8 times with both, then repeat.
Guaranteed to have a better night than Jacob deGrom. This is the Fantasy Greek Starts and Sits in 60 Minutes here, the Week 8 edition. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am Keith Greek from 87sportsfans.com, and as always, joined in the co-pilot seat is Mr. Jim Sarentius, the Fantasy Greek himself from thefantasygreek.com. Jim, welcome. Happy Wednesday, I suppose.
Happy Wednesday, Keith. Thanks for having me. Feeling good, feeling strong, and obviously not as good as your Mets.
Yeah.
But, like I said, can't win them all.
Johnny Cueto and the Kansas City Royals have just sucked the life right out of me tonight. So, with that being...
Unlike what I'm about to do to you for the next hour.
No, I would never equate it to something like that. Anyway, so if you are new to the program, kids, this is how it works. We go matchup by matchup on the NFL schedule, giving you all of the inside fantasy football advice that you need to set your lineup. We'll also pick games straight up, no point spread here. If you have any specific lineup questions or issues that you want to call and get Jim's take on, the phone number is 585-633-7487. That number again is 585-633-7487. Or if you have Twitter, like most everybody under the age of 65, tweet at the hashtag AskTFG, and we will get to your respective issue as time allows. So, without further ado, let's head over to the Thursday night game, the Miami Dolphins at the New England Patriots. And I am so looking forward to this game for a number of reasons. Dan Campbell, in his first 2 games as the interim head coach, because I don't think they've officially made him the head coach, has rejuvenated the Dolphins for whatever reason. Beating the Texans last week 44-26, but that game was not as close as the score would indicate. The Dolphins thoroughly dominated the Texans from start to finish in this game. The Patriots, on the other hand, they faced a tough matchup themselves against the Jets. They came away victorious. And you start to think that while this Patriots team may not be the most talented, if you were going to do like a talent audit on the roster, but I really think Bill Belichick is doing one of the better coaching jobs that he's ever done, because they came up and they struggled against the run, and they did not let Chris Ivory get anything going in the New York Jets running game. You tip your cap to them. They win 30-23 last week. Tom Brady threw the ball 54 times for 355 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that's a good defense. That's a real good Jets defense he did that against. So here it is, kids. It's very simple. I'm not going to give you a bunch of bloated statistics. I think these two teams are a lot more even than we ever would have thought. And no, I'm not talking about the quarterback position. Brady is probably having his finest season. Ryan Tannehill will probably never get to that level. But when the Dolphins are clicking, Tannehill is capable. 18 of 19 last week, 282 yards for 4 touchdowns. And the Texans' defense is not, a schlep they picked up off the side of the road.
Dolphins.
Well, no, I was talking about the Texans' defense against Ryan Tannehill.
Okay.
So Tannehill is capable. This game is going to be close, just like last week, but if the Patriots can handle the Jets, they sure can handle the Dolphins. I'm picking the Patriots at home.
This is a great game coming right out of the gate for Week 8 between 2 teams that are going to be battling for that AFC East first spot. Obviously, the Patriots are the favored team here. I mean, this is just an offense that no defense has had an answer for, and last week's Jets team really looked like the defense that could possibly stop them. I think the Dolphins' defense will certainly challenge them. They haven't played an offense like this yet, and so I sort of consider that a strike against the Dolphins, and I'm going to give the edge to the Patriots to win this one at home. I like the opportunity for fantasy points galore for certain specific players. They include Ryan Tannehill, Jordan Cameron, who is sort of a low TE1 this week. I know people that have him are not happy with him. He just hasn't put up the kind of numbers that you'd like from a high TE1, which is, I think, the way everybody treated him, but he's just not playing that way. Jarvis Landry is a great start. Rashard Matthews is a great start as a wide receiver 3. I like Lamar Miller. The Patriots are pretty tough against the rush, but they're giving up a nice, healthy 100-plus yards rushing. It's whether or not he can get in the end zone. And the way the Dolphins are coming out and just punching people in the face, I like his chances. For the Patriots, obviously you're starting Tom Brady, you're starting Rob Gronkowski, you're starting Julian Edelman. These are all very steady fantasy producers going against a defense which could surprise us all this Thursday night. I mean, we don't know exactly what we're going to get, but I like to think that under the new coaching regime, they're motivated and they're ready to play real football against a good team. I think the Dolphins' chances of winning will be better the second time around. A player you can consider would be Brandon LaFell for the Patriots. I know Danny Amendola has been the one that's producing the last 2 weeks, but you have to be careful of those numbers. 2 weeks ago when he produced, I think it was 80 yards and maybe a score, maybe it was 80 yards, something like that. The reality was that the opponent at that time had shut down Robert Gronkowski, held him to just 5 receptions, so Brady just had to go to the next available guy, and that happened to be Danny Amendola. And last week it was really because Tom Brady threw the heck out of the football over 50 times. So I would stay away from Danny Amendola, lean towards Brandon LaFell at a wide receiver 3, low and wide receiver 3 if you need him. I like both defenses, but they're both very middle of the road for me. In other words, there's several better defenses that you can play this week. What I would do if I were you, come to thefantasygreek.com, go check out our player rankings, join our Skybox so you can actually get the game-by-game analysis where we go through every start, every sit, and guys sort of in the middle and explain to you why we view them the way we do and how you should view them in terms of evaluating on your roster. Other than that, Keith, I'm taking the Patriots for the first game this week with the win.
The Detroit Lions travel to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Lions got their first win of the season 2 weeks ago against the Bears, and things looked pretty good in the first quarter, going up 14-3 on the Minnesota Vikings. But then the Lions regressed back into their inability to score ways, scoring just 5 lonely points the rest of the way, losing 28-19 at home to Teddy Bridgewater's Minnesota Vikings. The Chiefs, on the other hand, were able to hold off the Steelers. Yes, I know it was the Landry Jones Steelers. But of note for the Chiefs was a coming-out party of sorts with Charkandrick West. The Steelers had surprised everybody with an ability to defend the run fairly well. And Charkandrick West ran for 22 times for 110 yards and a touchdown. I think that might just be the beginning of what West's role in this offense may be going forward and his ability. And you look at the Lions, they give up way too many points. They don't run the ball. They pass the ball. And I think if West is going to be this running back for Kansas City and allow them to control the clock, we know Alex Smith doesn't take any chances. Yes, he will probably be without Jeremy Maclin, who's listed as questionable right now. Last updated yesterday, so I haven't heard whether that has changed yet or anything. But if he does not play, it will be a little bit challenging. I don't have any faith in this Detroit Lions team in Kansas City, a tough place to play, very loud stadium. I'm going to take the Chiefs.
Actually, Keith, let me stop you right there. They're playing in London, 9:30 a.m.
You're right. It's right in front of me. Game info, Wembley Stadium, 9:18. I'm still taking the Chiefs, by the way.
Okay. Just in case that affected your...
This Mets loss today has just got me all kinds of messed up. Oh, my God. I'm a mess.
It's all right. Like you, I like the Chiefs in this game. All the talk of, and we have a great article on the site right now about the bottom 4 head coaches on the hot seat. And obviously we have the head coach for the Lions, Jim Caldwell, as one of those coaches that are on that hot seat. And, they fired the offensive coordinator. They fired the offensive line coaches. How about the defensive coordinator? This is a team that has given up 22 touchdowns on the season. I don't know if that's the most amongst all teams. I think I have a chart here somewhere I could find and double check that at the break. But they do give up the most rushing touchdowns in the NFL, which means Charkandrick West is one of the best starts this week. I don't know if I have him in the top 10. I'm going to go back and take a look, but I think, there's a reason to put a guy in the top 10. He's one of them. You have him. You make sure you get him started. If not, it's your first running back, but definitely is your second. Then I also like Jeremy Maclin, by the way, did practice today, and he did practice in full. I like him in this game as well, with the Lions giving up 268 yards per game and just about 2 TDs per game. He and Travis Kelce are the two go-to guys in this offense. A majority of the fantasy points do go to the wide receiver position, so Maclin should be that go-to guy. Now, does that mean you have to start Alex Smith in this game? I sort of lean into that and say probably not, because he has a really hard time throwing for more than 1 touchdown for whatever reason. Can he do it? Sure. Has he done it? Yes. Could he throw for more than 2? Sure. But when you look at his history, it just makes you kind of say, I can't trust him to necessarily do that, but he could. For the Lions, Matt Stafford is a nice low QB1 this week. The Chiefs are giving up 264 yards per game. That's 10th most in the NFL. And then they give up the second most TDs in the NFL at 15. Where their stout is in their rush defense, which is sort of why this gets a little lopsided and why you could see the Chiefs actually winning. So for the Lions, Matt Stafford, Calvin Johnson is a must-start. Eric Ebron came back last week and picked up where he left off. He gets roughly around 5 to 7 targets, and he usually hauls in 5 of those. And he's been good enough to get you 50 to 70 yards receiving. And I think he could actually chip in and possibly get one of those TDs, with the other one going to Calvin Johnson. So I like those 3. Golden Tate is an option, not a great option. Lance Moore, avoid him because with Ebron back, it's just not a good play. Defensively, take a look at the Chiefs' defense. I don't know if I have them in the top 5, but they certainly are, if not in the top 5, outside of it. And here's why. They average 2 sacks per game, and the Lions to date have given up 16 sacks on the season, 10 interceptions, and 4 fumbles. You start that Chiefs defense if you got them. Other than that, cheerio. Chiefs win.
Cheerio. Okay.
Cheerio.
Moving right along.
Cheerio.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to the Atlanta Falcons. This one's actually stateside. I know this one. This one's in the Georgia Dome.
Sure.
This one I'm sure of. What's funny is that it's a dome stadium, and the forecast is still listed that it calls for rain. It makes no difference in a dome, obviously, folks, but we know what the rain's going to be outside. Anywho, 2-4 Buccaneers, 6-1 Falcons. The Falcons have been rejuvenated by new head coach Dan Quinn. The Buccaneers, second-year head coach Lovie Smith, not quite so rejuvenated, and for a variety of reasons. 2 very different stories. Doug Martin had a nice week against the Redskins in a last-second loss, which gave us a great Kirk Cousins soundbite. Find that on YouTube. You like that.
I did like it. God, you should play that after the break.
Okay, after the break. The Falcons are just a much better team than the Buccaneers. I'm taking the Falcons here. Who's on the fantasy horizon here?
Well, on the fantasy horizon is always Devonta Freeman. He's a weekly must start. You definitely get Roddy White in there and expect some good things. This Bucs defense, while they're a little stingy giving up the pass yards, about 220, 15 pass TDs on the season. That's pretty much a guaranteed 2 pass TDs. Now, Matt Ryan, you think, this is a great game for Matt, and it is a great game for Matt Ryan. He's had some struggles this season. I don't think he's thrown for over 2 TDs in a game, and if he's done it, I think he's only done it twice. So I like him, but I like him as a low QB1. There's plenty of other quarterbacks to play ahead of him if you have them. And again, come to our player rankings. You can see who some of those players are. Start the Falcons defense. Tampa Bay's given up 12 sacks on the season, 4 fumbles, and 3 defensive TDs. So I like an opportunity there if Jameis Winston makes a mistake. Speaking of Jameis Winston, avoid him this week. You're going to be without Vincent Jackson this week. He's got an injury. I forget what the injury is, but from the sounds of it, he's been already ruled out. Austin Seferian-Jenkins actually sounds like he's coming back. And if that is true, you can view him as a low-end TE1 because I think he'll be heavily involved in the offense. Mike Evans is a must-play, and I certainly like him for daily fantasy sports this week. And, the Falcons, they're this team that literally gives up the second least rush yards in the league, 78 yards. But then they give up 10 rushing TDs. That's an average of just almost 2 per game. And they give up the 3rd most fantasy points, which means they're giving up a bunch of fantasy points to running backs through the air. Based on these numbers, I like both Doug Martin and Charles Sims this week. Doug Martin is a for certain RB2. They're running the ball hard. They don't care who it is. I mean, he's going to get his 25 touches, and he's going to make something out of it. And then you got Charles Sims, sort of, let's look at him as a guy that could get you 60, 80 yards and a TD. So, this whole thing, I think I easily had the over on the Lions and Chiefs over 50. The Bucks and the Falcons, it's closer call, but I still like it for over 50. I'm taking the Falcons at home.
Oh, righty then. Falcons. This should be a really laughable game. I got a bad feeling about that.
Which
game.
one?
The Buccaneers Falcons. I got a feeling that Atlanta's going to roll. I
mean, they really should. And in large part, if Vincent Jackson is not there, they really should.
All right, the Chargers, the beleaguered Chargers, 2-5, going to the beleaguered Ravens. We'll call this the beleaguered bowl. The 1-6 Baltimore Ravens. Definitely not your father's Ravens here. How do these teams match up? Well, San Diego actually plays decent pass defense as far as yardage, but both of these teams just give up points left and right. Like they're employing the turnstile defense. That's their scheme. San Diego can pass the ball really well. But this is one of those West Coast teams going to the East Coast. I never like that. I'm going to pick the Ravens at home.
Yeah, I see the logic in that, and I had the hardest time getting to that point because of all the problems the Ravens have on defense. I just got done editing and posting the Ravens game review of the Monday Night Football game against the Cardinals. And, it was a real nice analogy. You have to go read it for yourself to truly appreciate it. But, it's a comedy of errors defensively for the Ravens. They can't tackle. They're making mistakes all over the place. They're the amount of penalties that they're being called for is just – it's unbelievable. They're 1-6 for a reason. And then the offense, well, I can't say it's bad. I mean, if you compare it to the Chargers, right now, Phillip Rivers is throwing the football so much. I mean, a concern of mine for Phillip Rivers is if he's going to make it the entire season without hurting his arm or at least, slowing down, losing some of his arm strength. But for now, he's looking great. And the Ravens are a team that are giving up the fifth most yards, 280 per game, and the fourth most TDs, 13 on the season. So that's a guaranteed 280 yards, 2 TDs this weekend for Phillip Rivers. You take that to the bank. You start him. You start Keenan Allen, who should have a huge game. Huge game. You start Ladarius Green, who's a good low TE1. And you could start Danny Woodhead as an RB2 or a flex play.
Minutes and started all 82.
What the hell was that?
Sorry. Interference. We'll call it interference.
That's a penalty. See?
Yes.
We talk about the Ravens and the penalty, and you get one, Keith, right there. And then Joe Flacco, he's an option for sure, because I think what's going to happen here is they're going to be forced into the position to throw the football. But the question is who are they going to throw it to? You can only throw it to Steve Smith so much. I like Crockett Gilmore as a low-end TE1 this week. He did pretty well last week, I think 55 yards on 7 targets. That's pretty much what you're going to get, but you want him to get the score. There's great opportunity in that this weekend. And certainly you start Justin Forsett against a Chargers team giving up the second most yards on the ground at 132 and a guaranteed 1 TD per game. I like Forsett. If not as a low RB1, certainly a very strong RB2. But Keith, this is a bad season for Jim Harbaugh. And if he gets through it, it's because of that Super Bowl and people have faith in him, and it was just one bad year. But, man, sitting at 1-7 is not going to look pretty if they lose, but I'm taking the Chargers.
Oh, taking the Chargers.
I am. They're just scoring too many points. Just too many points.
Living on the edge there. All right, the Minnesota Vikings travel to the Chicago Bears. The Bears coming off a bye week. And one less face around. Jeremiah Ratliff was summarily dismissed from the team after a violent outburst, which started, and all of a sudden this story surfaces that in one of the last, before the last game last year, Ratliff had a similar outburst, destroyed a scoreboard at the practice field, shoved a head coach, and Trestman not only didn't discipline him, he made him a captain for that game. So, which just kind of tells you all you need to know about last year's Chicago Bears. This year's Bears are a little bit more disciplined, and obviously they're not taking any junk from anybody. They released Ratliff after his last outlook. But the bottom line is that Ratliff was probably the best interior lineman on the roster, and so that leaves a bigger hole when you have Adrian Peterson and company coming to town, and a defense that already we don't know what to really expect from them. They've done a decent job, limiting passing yards per game. They're still giving up $124 on the ground, and while that's 20, then that is good in parentheses for 25th in the league. They're second to worst in scoring defense, and they just had a week off, kids. That's how bad this defense is. Teddy Bridgewater and company, for all the limitations that Bridgewater may have in his game, being a second year player, he's got a new toy called Stephon Diggs. And I don't like the way that this team is going to match up with the Bears. I think Adrian Peterson is going to have a big day, and I'm going to take the Vikings to come into Chicago and win this game.
Keith, like you, I'm a believer in this Vikings team. I don't know that they have what it takes if they can make the playoffs to go deep into the playoffs, but I certainly like them this week against a Bears team that, I'm not sure what the week off will do for them. The Vikings are really going to come out and play strong defensive football, and that's their forte. And speaking of forte, Matt Forte, while I have him as an RB1, this is not an easy matchup for him, and here's why. The reason why he's an RB1 or a low RB1, even if you demote him to an RB2 and compare him to other guys, is the Vikings are giving up 106 yards rushing on the ground and just 3 touchdowns all season, rush TDs. But he's sort of ranked high because he's a volume guy. We know he's going to get, or he should get, a lot of touches in this offense, and that gives him value. And that means he has a better possibility of scoring than any other player, and that's how you should view him. You can like Martellus Bennett because he's a go-to guy, and Alshon Jeffrey. I mean, Jay Cutler's going to do something here. He's going to throw at least 1 passing TD, more than likely 2. And Jeffrey and Bennett are the 2 guys that he's probably going to go to. But are those numbers going to be good enough for him to be fantasy relevant? Plus, considering the risk that he may not throw to, I'd say no, and I would actually try to avoid Jay Cutler at all costs. For the Vikings, AP, you start him. I'm worried about him. I can't sit here and tell you that Adrian Peterson is having that great of a season. I mean, lots of people said he was the number 1 draft pick. We didn't. We said it was Le'Veon Bell. We still believe it's Le'Veon Bell. And when Ben Roethlisberger gets back, it will be Le'Veon Bell. But if you look at Adrian Peterson's last 2 games, I mean, he's only got 160 yards rushing. No TDs. That's not very good for a guy that you spent a top draft pick on. No. And if you look at the week before their bye week, he only had 81. And then he had a TD too, thankfully, against the Broncos and their number 1 defense. But I'm worried that he is going to slow down as this season progresses. That's what we worried about before, and I'm starting to think we're going to see that. That having been said, you start him against the Bears. The Bears give up 124 rushing yards and hopefully get you a TD. They're a little stingier against the rush with only 2 TDs on the season. Stephon Diggs, a must-start. He's a wide receiver, too. He has proven his worth. He is ahead of Mike Wallace in this offense. Mike Wallace, though, is a decent start as well, and here's why. Because the Bears, they give up 220 yards through the air and second most TDs in the league with 15. So there's 2 pass TDs out there for somebody to get. That makes Teddy Bridgewater an option. He's a better option than Cutler, but he has sort of the same risk, I think, in that, he could just throw 1 TD. He's just not one of these guys that sort of has progressed his game where it's guaranteed. Kyle Rudolph is a high tight end 2, low TE1 this week, and the Vikings defense is a must start. A lot of people have come to me already saying, who can I get off the waiver wire, and here are my options. And as soon as I hear the Vikings, I'm like, get the Vikings. The Bears are giving up, I think, the 5th. They're among the top 5 in most fantasy points allowed, and that's because they're giving up their share of sacks, turnovers, interceptions, and they've given up 2 defensive touchdowns and 2 return touchdowns. So there's even a chance for the Vikings and Cordarrelle Patterson to make some real noise in this game. I'm taking the Vikings, sadly.
The Arizona, with much remorse.
Well, no, only because we're Bears fans. Right. I mean, it's just. But the Vikings have the better team right now.
It hurts to have to pick against your favorite team at home.
It does.
God, I feel dirty, filthy. I need to go take a shower. Anyway, the Arizona, but that's for other reasons. The Arizona Cardinals at the Cleveland Browns, 5-2 Cardinals, 2-5 Browns. Look, the Cardinals are going to win this game. It's just that simple. The Browns are a mess. Whatever signs of life that we think that we see quickly get snuffed out like a candle in a cave that is suddenly sealed off from all oxygen. The Cardinals win, Jim. Who's on the fantasy horizon here?
Well, for the Browns, I've got Duke Johnson, and that's only because I think he could be very much involved in the short passing game. But I like him more of a running back 3 or a flex play. And if he's a flex play, you certainly should consider him to your wide receivers. Travis Benjamin is a wide receiver 3. For the Cardinals, go ahead and start Carson Palmer just because of his pedigree, as well as the fact that the Browns, I mean, they're not bad in pass defense, but, they're still giving up close to 2 pass TDs per game and 240 yards passing per game. So, Palmer, again, he's sort of a lower QB1, but he's got the pedigree, which gives him a higher rank. Chris Johnson, who I referred to earlier as Obi-Wan Kenobi, or Obi-Wan Johnson. There we go, Obi-Wan Johnson, because I don't like that CJ2K thing anymore. I mean, it just doesn't work. He's up there in age, and yet he is playing with the young men, and he is just devastatingly good. What he did last week to not touch the ground, get up and turn what looked like nothing into an additional 60-yard rushes, which got a score for the Cardinals, is just absolutely amazing. This is a Browns team giving up a league worst. Catch this number and just think about it. 151 yards per game. Rushing. That's crazy. And plus 8 TDs on the season, so that guarantees him a TD. He'll be one of the top starts this week. Start John Brown. He's clearly moved ahead, I think, of both Fitzgerald and Michael Floyd. I have Fitzgerald as sort of a RB2, low-end RB2, somewhere there. Michael Floyd is a wide receiver 3. Definitely get the Cardinals going. They're a top 5 start this week. You can look at Andre Ellington as a flex play, given how generous the Browns are to running backs. And I think you do have to avoid McCown this week, as well as Isaiah Crowell. The Cardinals they're just tough against the pass, and I can think of many other quarterbacks to start ahead of McCown and many other running backs to start ahead of Crowell. Cardinals win on the road.
So you were trying to officially change Chris Johnson's nickname to Obi-Wan Johnson.
You got it.
Oh, we polled the audience, and everyone, what's your reaction to that? It's just a terrible nickname.
I mean, what's the other option?
I give me a week.
Darth Johnson.
No, leave Star Wars out of this. Dear God, just don't call him Jar Jar Johnson. We'll be all set.
What's his number on his jersey? 21.
I believe so, but I could
0021.
Stop. Enough. This is just bad. Kids, what did you think of that?
I'll work on it, but the CJ2K thing's got to go.
It's not looking good. You're having a rough night with the kids. You take it easy on him. Jim's very sensitive. All right. The Tennessee Titans travel to the Houston Texans. The 1-5 Titans, the 2-5 Texans. Has there been more shock teams that have shocked you as far as how abysmal they are? And the Houston Texans are right up there. Yeah, we had questions about their quarterback situation, but you know what? I didn't expect them to be this bad. The Titans, on the other hand, are 1-5. They got a rookie quarterback, but that rookie quarterback is injured, and he's doing the whole shoulder shrug. What, me worry? Maybe I'll play. Maybe I won't. I don't know. Practiced with a brace the other day, so even if he does play, he's going to be limited, and he's probably just going to be a little different than the Marcus Mariota we've seen in the early part of this season. That being said, how do these teams match up? Well, the Texans, for all of their quarterback dysfunction, are 4th in the league in passing yards per game. Don't ask me how they do it. I don't know. The Tennessee Titans play pretty good defense. The problem is they just struggle scoring. And for that reason, I'm going to take Houston at home.
Yeah, Keith, I'll go there with you, too. I mean, I had a real hard time looking at this game and figuring out what's going to happen. I think it'll be a close game. And I think if Marcus Mariota can play, I think they have a genuine chance because the Texans' pass defense is so bad. We'll get to that in a second. But when you look at the Tennessee Titans and you look at their points scored versus their points allowed, they're a pretty damn good team. But, man, the points scored against them in their favor is not good enough to do what it takes to win a football game, which is why I'm taking the Texans, and the Texans can put up some really good points. So from a fantasy perspective, I think if you've got Alfred Blue, you got to treat him as an RB2 if you picked him up this week. The Titans are pretty generous, actually, against the position. 129 yards per game, just about 1 TD per game. Hopefully he will be treated like a starting running back, not just in lip service that he'll be our starter, but to actually give him 15 to 25 touches, because he smacks of a running back that needs to sort of get lathered up and get out there on the field and get his 2-yard runs and then connect them with 15-yard runs. So hopefully that happens. You start Andre Hopkins last week was just, what they did defensively to Andre Hopkins last week was, something that doesn't happen often, and I don't think it'll happen 2 weeks in a row. Get Nate Washington out there for the injured Cecil Shorts. As long as Shorts is out, Washington will be a target. Brian Hoyer, this Titans defense, pass defense, number 2 in the NFL, 195 yards allowed per game, under 2 TDs per game. So I think he's a guy to avoid. Start the Texans defense, because whoever's under center, they're a rookie or a second-year player, and either way they're inexperienced, and this is just a favorable matchup for the Texans. For the Titans, I like Kendall Wright a lot. I don't know what we're going to get when Mettenberger's under center, but if Mariota's under center, I like him a lot, and he's almost an assured wide receiver 3. Delaney Walker, I think, is a safe low-end TE1 in all formats, because they just go to him, and that's all you need. If you're looking for some running back help, you can look to Antonio Andrews. And here's why. The Texans are giving up 128 rushing yards and a little over 1 rushing TD per game. They allow the 6th most fantasy points allowed, so that even means Dexter McCluster might give you a little something, but Dexter's only good in 14 or 16-team leagues. Otherwise, Keith, it's the Texans. This should help Bill O'Brien at least stave the Wolves off for another week, because there's a guy that's on the hot seat. And again, if you want to know more, come to thefantasygreek.com and read our bottom 4 article.
All right, we're at the halfway point. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to do something different this week. Instead of 2 songs, we're just going to do 1, because it's just, honestly, it's a waste of time. And you guys want to listen to us. We understand that. So, and maybe we won't run over this week. Maybe. So, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll go through the second half of the schedule. You're listening to the Fantasy Greek Starts and Sits in 60 Minutes here on Late Night Sports Radio.
Second to keep breathing in the moment before it's gone. You never know when love is lost until you find just what it costs to be wrong. I wonder if you think of me passing by, you think you see me coming. I wonder if you pull me in, kiss me just one time again. Coming and the nights will keep on going till they're tired, falling fast asleep, and as they dream of ghosts of beats filled with desire. The chance of life is all around, a chance to take is always found. Writing all my lullabies, I'm alone and living life. Do you remember? Lost
hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
The Fantasy Greek starts and sits in 60 minutes here on latenightsportsradio.com. Second half of the program is brought to you by the Skybox at thefantasygreek.com. Get hooked up for all of the up-to-date changes, ranking updates, injury updates, start and sit updates on Sunday morning as you are beginning your day like we all do on Sunday morning. In some form or another, you're grabbing a cup of coffee, you're looking at your lineup, and you're like, what the heck do I do about one or two slots?
And you waited until the last minute to do it.
It's even like I see who's on a bye, I see who's available on the waiver wire, I make my waiver claims, I make my trade offers, I reject my other trade offers. And then come Sunday morning, it's just kind of like it's almost like a Zen thing, like flowing robes, like people standing on pyramids around me, and I just kind of look at my computer. And I usually make
me to have all the answers.
I expect you to have all the
your
answers.
problems.
Exactly. If there's anything I'm not certain of, I expect you to be the one to sort it out for me. So anyway, go to thefantasygreek.com, sign up for the Skybox, own your league. Don't just be in your league. All right, so we are at the halfway point of the rundown here, and we are now at the New York Giants traveling to the New Orleans Saints, the 4-3 Giants and the 3-4 Saints. The Saints are just abysmal on defense. They really are. But the Giants aren't all that much better. And to go with it, yardage-wise, they don't really move the ball all that well. The Saints, on the other hand, at least are third in the league in passing. They both are in the same neighborhood as far as points scored. There was only five total points separating these two, but the Saints defense really is. I'm not, when I say it's abysmal, I mean it's abysmal. The only thing stopping anybody in New Orleans are the stop signs in the parking lot. So I am actually going to take the Giants to go down the road and win this game.
Keith, I am too, in another high-scoring game. I can't tell you if this will go over 50 or just come in under 50, but it'll be around there. The Saints have the worst pass defense in all of fantasy football, giving up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks, meaning Eli Manning is an absolute must-start this week. I mean, there's very few quarterbacks ranked ahead of him. Again, come to thefantasygreek.com, check our rankings. Start Odell Beckham with confidence. He should definitely get back in the end zone this weekend, possibly even twice. A tight end I have to love this week is Larry Donnell. Saints are giving up a boatload of fantasy points to the tight end position. So even though he's not necessarily the tight end that's getting he's certainly no Gronkowski, but in this particular week the matchup is right. In terms of Giants running backs, again, come to our rankings to get them. I would sort of try and stay away from them. I mean, if you're going to go with one, go with Shane Vereen. But I know this week, I saw people were asking me about Orleans Darkwood. I mean, the guy had 8 carries. That's all he had was 8 carries. He made the most out of it in one game. Can he do it again this week? You'd like to think so. Is he necessarily going to? I don't know. I think there's other better choices. But again, check our rankings before you plug them into your lineup for a play. Treat Drew Brees as a low QB1. The Giants are giving up the third most pass yards in the league at 288. They're a little stingier in terms of TDs, with just 10 on the season. But Brees has enough, company on the team to make a little bit of noise. Certainly Mark Ingram is a start. Willie Snead, I think, is a start in a favorable matchup. He should be a yardage machine. Brandon Cooks, what do you want me to tell you about the guy? He's a fantasy bust. He was drafted very high. People expected him to carry their fantasy teams and give it that little extra push that you expect from a second wide receiver, and he's just not doing it. So treat him as a wide receiver 3. Treat Ben Watson as a tight end 2, and avoid both defenses because this will be a mecca of fantasy points, Keith.
Mecca. That is setting the bar fairly high here.
Thank you.
All right. The Cincinnati Bengals, the undefeated Bengals, travel to the Pittsburgh Steelers 4-3, and hooray for Steeler fans! Ben Roethlisberger practiced fully today. which is it hasn't been officially announced, but it looks like he will be returning this Sunday under center. And if you watched Landry Jones last week against the Chiefs, you are relieved if you're a Steelers fan. Absolutely. The problem here, kids, is that the Bengals are playing fantastic football. They're third in scoring offense, 11th in scoring defense, 5th in passing yards per game, 12th in rushing yards per game. They can give up a good amount of yards on defense, but they don't allow a whole lot of people to score. The Steelers, on the other hand, you can't look at any of their numbers because they've been without Roethlisberger for so long. And when Roethlisberger was there, the offense was clicking fairly well, and he didn't have all that time with Le'Veon Bell, and it was still clicking before he got hurt. So I think with the return of Roethlisberger, the rising from the ashes, the phoenix rising from the ashes, will rejuvenate this team at home. The stadium's going to be nuts. It's a division game. I think the Steelers hand the Bengals their first loss of the year.
Ooh. Wow. Well, then I guess I'm calling the Bengals to win this game. And I'm doing that, being a little conservative here. Ben Roethlisberger, the times that he's been injured, the very first game out of those injuries, first of all, he's only 2-4. So it's going against him. From a fantasy perspective, he's averaging 191 yards per game, slightly better than 1 TD per game, and slightly better than 1 interception per game. So there's just things that sort of point, red flag, bad things can happen here. Now the reality is I like Ben Roethlisberger. I think the offense is tailor-made for him, and even if he can't run around too much, he can certainly get the ball out of his hands and get it to his wide receivers and do some damage. So as we get closer to this weekend, check our ranks. He should move up a little bit from a low QB1 more towards the middle. Consider some of the players we have ranked ahead of him. And certainly I think if Andy Dalton is your other quarterback for some reason, which is possible because he wasn't drafted by most people as a QB1, he was most people's backups, or he was picked up off the waiver wire, I would actually start Dalton ahead of Roethlisberger just this week. But what it does do is it makes Antonio Brown an WR1 again. It makes Martavius Bryant a strong wide receiver 3 up to a wide receiver 2, and it certainly increases the value of Le'Veon Bell, where defenses must respect the Steelers' passing game, and it opens up running lanes for Le'Veon Bell. For the Bengals, look, the Steelers are giving up the 6th most passing yards, 276 per game, and are giving almost 2 TDs per game. And the Bengals' offense is flowing through their passing game. I mean, there's hardly any running to do, and the Steelers are actually 99 yards a game and just 2 TDs on the season. So expect Andy Dalton to be throwing the ball 40-plus times. So you got to play Gio Bernard because he's the receiving running back. You got to play Tyler Eifert, who's getting, I think it's the Steelers give it the 3rd most fantasy points to the position. You're certainly playing A.J. Green. And if you're looking for another player to play as a sneaky play, I would go with Marvin Jones. I think there's opportunities here for Andy Dalton to possibly throw 3 TDs. In the end, it's just too soon for me, Keith, to say that the Steelers will bounce back and be the team that they were right before Ben Roethlisberger got injured. So in this game, I'm going to take the Bengals.
The San Francisco 49ers at the St. Louis Rams. 49ers 2-5, the Rams 3-3. And Colin Kaepernick continues to underwhelm. 13 of 24 last week for 124 yards, albeit against the Seahawks, but still losing 20-3 last week. The Rams, on the other hand, beat the Browns convincingly, 24-6. And if that gives you reason to be encouraged, then hey, Todd Gurley had another fantastic week. 19 rushes, 128 yards, 2 scores. So. What's the tail of the tape? Well, both teams can't score. The only good thing for the Rams is that the Niners can't defend either, so that bodes well. Yay for them. Neither team can pass the ball very well. Both teams are okay running the ball, and neither team feels the need to tackle anybody, but the Rams do it slightly better, so I'm going to take the Rams at home. Yeah,
I got to go with the Rams too, Keith. This is the game during the break I mentioned we don't need to spend a lot of time on. For the 49ers, I really got nobody to suggest playing except maybe Carlos Hyde, and I have him sort of as a mid to low end RB2 with a negative sign by his name, indicating if you can't avoid him. Last week, the Rams just wrapped up the Browns' rushing game, and it was just a desert of fantasy points for those three running backs over there. So I just don't know how Carlos Hyde does better when Colin Kaepernick is going to struggle against the number one pass defense in fantasy football, giving up an average of 243 pass yards per game and just 5 TDs. That's a number one in the NFL. 5 TDs on the season. So you're sitting everybody except Carlos Hyde for the 49ers. And for the Rams, Todd Gurley should have a monster game. 113 yards allowed rushing, 7 rush TDs on the season by the Niners, but they're also allowing probably 50 to 70 yards through the air as they allow the 8th most fantasy points. And then the Rams DST, a must start. I mean, Colin Kaepernick implodes against really good defenses, and that's exactly what the Rams have, and I think they will be the number one defensive start of the week.
All right. The New York Jets travel to the Oakland Raiders. 4-2 Jets, 3-3 Raiders. The Jets losing what I consider to be a heartbreaker against the Patriots because they were in that game. They had a chance to turn the tables on probably the league's best team right now, but they just couldn't get the job done. And now they travel to the Oakland Raiders, who went into San Diego and beat the Chargers 37-29. Amari Cooper 5 catches for 133 yards. Derek Carr 24 of 31 for 289 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Jets, on the other hand, Ryan Fitzpatrick threw the ball 39 times against the Patriots for 295 yards, 2 touchdowns. Did have some turnovers, though. Chris Ivory couldn't get anything going, though. 17 rushes for 41 yards. And I think that ultimately spelled defeat for the Jets. With Fitzpatrick as your quarterback, you have to be able to run the ball. It's just that simple. That being said, for the season, the Jets are the 7th highest scoring offense in the NFL, which just blows my mind every time I look at it. They're also the 4th rated scoring defense. The Raiders don't have that kind of scoring defense. They just don't. They are very good against the run. They are atrocious against the pass. And I am actually going to take the Jets to go across the continent and win this game.
Keith, I am too. And I love what the Raiders have done. I am a believer in Derek Carr. I even think there's a possibility that Derek Carr can get 2 passing TDs in this game, so I sort of have him ranked as a mid-range QB2. I still like Amari Cooper as a wide receiver too, and I know Darrelle Revis will be all over him, but I think the talent is there. Clive Wolford is sort of a sneaky play because, look, at the end of the day, the Jets are still giving up 211 yards and about 1 passing TD, and somebody's got to get it. And I think Wolford is sort of this player that can sneak into the end zone when everybody else is looking at Cooper and get them a score. But I'm still taking the Jets because they've only given up 10 TDs on it. That's total rushing and passing, 10 TDs on the season. And, the Raiders are good. They've only given up 14. But I like Ryan Fitzpatrick. This offense is made for him. He's averaging roughly 240 passing yards per game, 2 pass TDs per game. This sets up right with the Raiders giving up a league worst 303 yards per game. If they give up 300 yards to Ryan Fitzpatrick, not only can he score twice, I think he could score 3 times when he's got all these talented players around him. Chris Ivory, Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker, all must starts this week. And I would even recommend Ryan Fitzpatrick as one of these players that you can pick up and play if your other quarterbacks have a tough matchups. A super sleeper in this game is Jeff Cumberland, tight end for the Jets. If you don't know, if you're like, who? That's okay. He's done nothing this year. Absolutely nothing. Last year he was a little bit more active in the offense, but the reality is the Raiders still allow the most fantasy points to the position. They've allowed tight ends multiple touchdowns in at least one other game, but generally speaking, it's almost a guarantee that they're going to rack up some points. So Cumberland is a super sleeper if you need him. I'd avoid Latavius Murray, period. The Jets are number 1 against the rush, 71 yards. That's it, 71 yards on average per game in just 2 rushing TDs the entire season. In fact, I think Marcel Reese might actually be a slightly better start if you're struggling and you need an RB. I mean, I might look to him and hope he could pull up what he did a couple weeks ago, which I think was 60 yards in a score. Other than that, Keith, I think the Jets sort of rebound and make up for what happened last week with the Patriots and beat down the Raiders a little bit.
The Seattle Seahawks travel to the Dallas Cowboys. The Seahawks 3-4. The Cowboys 2-4. Both teams kind of dealing with their own question marks. The Seahawks just haven't been the same. They've been there on defense, but they haven't been able to really score at all. They're 19th in the league in scoring right now. And the Seahawks with beast mode and Russell Wilson and and they added Jimmy Graham and they're only scored they're 19th in the league. It's god awful. Dallas, on the other hand, has been without Dez Bryant. They've been without Tony Romo. Dez Bryant listed as questionable according to ProFootballReference.com right now as he recovers from a broken foot. What's going to give here? At the end of the day, Seattle is the better team, right? You got to pick them. They're going to Dallas. So what's Dallas going to do? Is there any way that Dallas's offense can break the backs of the Seattle defense? Quite frankly, no, they can't. There's nothing they can do. Darren McFadden was anointed the starter this week. 29 rushes for 152 yards last week against the Giants. Good for you, because it's not going to happen this week against Seattle. It's just not. And I think the Seahawks defense snuffs the life out of Dallas and wins on the road.
I like the Seahawks to win this game easily, but from a fantasy perspective, to me, it favors the running backs, including Darren McFadden. I acknowledge that the Seahawks have not the number one, but one of the top rushing defenses, only 94 yards on average allowed on the ground, but roughly 1 TD per game. So you can start McFadden as a low RB2 this week. I will remind everybody last year when Dallas rolled into Seattle and had DeMarco Murray, they just crushed Seattle's rush defense. Crushed them. So I'm not saying Darren McFadden will do that, but I think there's reason to believe that he could at least put up enough points to make him a very viable RB2. So if you got him, you can start him. Dez Bryant, even if he plays, I forget where I ranked him, but I certainly wasn't as a wide receiver one. I can't imagine Matt Castle getting him the football in a way that puts him in a position to score, maybe one touchdown, maybe if he's lucky. Jason Witten, I think, is a nice tight end play. He was actively targeted last week. Plus, the Seahawks give up a bunch of fantasy points to the position. Top 5, as I recall. I like the Cowboys' defense this week, if only because the Seahawks are top 5 in most fantasy points allowed to opposing defenses, and that's because they lead the league with 31 sacks allowed. They also lead the league with 54 quarterback hits, which makes you realize why it is that Russell Wilson is having such a bad season. They've got 4 fumbles lost, 5 interceptions, 1 defensive touchdown TD, and 1 return TD. So if you got the Cowboys, you could play the Cowboys this week, and I don't think they're a bad play. Start the Seahawks defense. Start Marshawn Lynch. He should have a monster game this week. Just the way everything shapes up, 100 yards rushing a lot on the ground, 1 rush TD per game. But they're giving up the fourth most fantasy points to the position, which means he should get some yards through the air, and I even think a score through the air. Start Jimmy Graham because you don't know, he could do anything at any given time. Are there better tight end plays? Sure. Again, come to our site, look at our player rankings, and see who is ranked ahead of him. And Russell Wilson, avoid him. Sit him. He's just, even in good matchups, he's having a hard time scoring a second TD in order to break into fantasy relevance, which means there's other quarterbacks with better matchups. Seahawks win this one on the road. Boy, Tony Romo can't get back any sooner, Keith.
Agreed. And now we get to the matchup of the week. 2 6-0 teams squaring off, the Green Bay Packers at the Denver Broncos. Both teams 6-0. The Broncos' offensive struggles have been, well documented. But they still managed to score points. They're right in the middle of the pack with scoring points. But they're 19th in passing yards per game. They have not been able to run the ball at all. Only 85 yards per game on a team that had, what was thought to be a bright spot last season, and C.J. Anderson and breaking out, it was thought to be able to take and hold that role, and now he's pretty much lost the job to Ronnie Hillman. The defense, though, is the story of the Broncos. They are second in scoring, first in passing yards per game, fourth in rushing yards per game. It's going to be very interesting to see the league's probably best passing quarterback right now in Aaron Rodgers. You can take Tom Brady and him 1A, 1B if you want. I'm not here to argue with you. But it'll be interesting to see how Rodgers responds to the Denver defense, because the Packers have been able to run the ball, and they haven't really been passing a whole ton because he's been efficient. They don't need to throw for a bunch of yards. He just goes in there and just breaks your back with the score. The rushing defense in this game has been abysmal. So, or for the Packers, 22nd in the league, 118 yards per game. But the thing is that for all of the issues with the Packers defense as far as yardage, they don't allow points. They have the lowest scoring. They are the top-ranked scoring defense in the league. So something's got to give here. Peyton Manning is in Denver. He's home. The Packers' offense, though, I think it's just too much right now. And as good as Denver's defense is, being at home, I think the Packers squeak this out just because I don't think Denver's going to be able to score enough points. I'm going to take the Packers on the road in Denver. Oh, my God, I can't believe I said that.
Yeah, I can't believe you did either. I'm going to stick with the Broncos at home. They've had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. 2 weeks. And I think with 2 weeks' time, they've had enough time to work on their offensive line, to work out some of their offensive woes, to watch the game tape of the Chargers take on the Packers, where the Chargers almost won the game. So I also think that this is one of these games that will just beg Peyton Manning to bring out the best Peyton Manning that we've ever seen. That having been said, I don't have Peyton Manning as a top 5 quarterback. I have him ranked towards the bottom of the top 10. However, I think he's still in line for 2 TDs. I still think you roll out there with Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. I like Emmanuel Sanders to have a big game here. Ronnie Hillman is the running back to start as an RB2. The Packers still give up 120 yards rushing on the ground and 4 TDs on the season, which is pretty good, but it's not the greatest either. The Broncos are much better in that category, only allowing 90 yards rushing on the ground, 4 rush TDs. They do give up some yardage through the air, which makes James Starks sort of, I guess appealing. But I'm not a big fan of James Starks this week or Eddie Lacy. I think this might be a rougher go for them. Devontae Adams is a big part of this. Randall Cobb has struggled. He's going to struggle against Aqib Talib. I do not see Randall Cobb beating out Aqib Talib. I think Devontae Adams, if he can win his individual battle, then there might be something to say about the passing game. I do have this as a close score because I think both defenses are very good. Broncos will be challenged. I mean, this is the best team that they've ever faced. Start both defenses. I have it as a low score, 23-20, so it's a close game. But I still think that the Broncos, at the end of the day, win this at home.
All right. And our final game, the Monday Nighter, the Indianapolis Colts travel to the Carolina Panthers. The 6-0 Panthers, they are legit, folks, for whatever reason. They may be a little unorthodox in how they do it, but they are legit. The Colts are 3-4, struggling. We're talking about Chuck Pagano being on the hot seat. We're talking about Jim Irsay getting into shouting matches with Ryan Grigson in the locker room after the game. The Colts are a mess all of a sudden. They were in the AFC Championship game last year. If you ask me, it's karma for trying to make a big deal out of those deflated footballs. But we're not going to talk about Deflategate here, kids. We're going to talk about the 6-0 Panthers. They are 6th in the league in scoring, 6th in scoring defense. They don't have to pass the ball that much, which is good because they don't really have a whole ton of receivers. But they are 1st in rushing yards per game. They run the ball for 144 yards per game on average. It's just fantastic. The Colts.
Who are you talking about?
The Panthers.
I got him as 144. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong number.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
But I'm just waiting. Thank God you got knee pads on. Keep going.
No, you know what? The Panthers get, I think, a kind of I don't want to say bad rep, but I don't think they get the respect they deserve because they've got the big name at quarterback and Cam Newton. But this team is ground and pound. They run the ball and they play defense. This is as old school a team in the modern NFL as you will find, and they do it well. The Colts, on the other hand, are going to struggle. They don't score points. They don't stop people from scoring. They're -8 with a takeaway differential that does not bode well against this this defense. And, their own defense, like I said, they give up $122 a game, and they also give up $285 through the air. So, Cam Newton to Greg Olsen or Devin Funchess, if he decides to step up, it's going to probably be a big week for the Panthers, I think, because the Colts, they're just a mess, and they're on the road. The Colts might have a fighting chance of me wanting to believe that this is the week that they refind their identity, they reclaim their identity, but they're going to Carolina. Absolutely not, and Carolina's too good. I'm taking the Panthers.
Yeah, I'm taking the Panthers, too. I mean, the Colts have just an array of problems. Again, come to the Fantasy Greek. Our bottom 4 article covers a lot of this. I mean, Pagano and the general manager were arguing about personnel issues after the season had started. I mean, or at least it was being reported as the season was started. So you come to the site. We've got a link to those, and you could read all about that. So there's a lot of problems here, and I think it shows up in the play, whether it be through the mentality, whether it be through Andrew Luck just starting the season hurt and them falling behind the 8 ball. The Panthers have a good defense. I mean, Josh Norman is going to shut down T.Y. Hilton. So from a fantasy perspective, you're starting Dante Moncrief. But you could even make an argument that Andre Johnson might actually be a sneaky wide receiver 3, sneaky flex play because of how badly T.Y. Hilton should be shut down. Now, would I bench T.Y. Hilton? No, I would view him as a wide receiver too, because he is still an outstanding talent. And if somebody could actually put up 80 yards in a score against one of the best cornerbacks in the league, I think it is T.Y. Hilton. Andrew Luck gets a downgrade. He's sort of a more of a lower QB1 this week. Frank Gore, I think, is a must start, because if the Colts have a chance here, they've got to beat the Panthers on the ground. And the Panthers are giving up 110 rush yards and 1 TD per game on the ground. The Colts have to capture that in the scoreboard in order to have a chance to win. If they don't, then all bets are off. And not only, I mean, I've got the Panthers winning, but then I think then it becomes a lopsided win by the Panthers. For the Panthers, go ahead and start Cam Newton. Start Jonathan Stewart, a guy that I told people to cut a couple weeks ago. I mean, they're using him. They're using him in a way that I don't think anybody anticipated. Now, does that mean that he'll be any less of an injury risk? No. If he gets hurt this week, don't be surprised. Start Greg Olsen. He is one of the dominant tight ends. He's like a top 3 play every single week. Start the Panthers defense. They're dominating. And a player that I like this particular week who can put up a decent amount of yards, a fair amount, but has the bigger threat to score and usually scores in favorable matchups like this where the Colts are giving up the 4th most pass yards in the league of 285 and roughly 2 TDs per game, is Ted Ginn of the Panthers. You have my blessings to start him, and you can start him with confidence, Keith. Panthers win.
Ooh, we have your blessing. Wow, look at that.
Blessing.
All right, and with that, kids, we are out of time. For Jim Sarantias from thefantasygreek.com, I am Keith Gree from 87sportsfans.com. You can catch us here every Wednesday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, giving you all of your fantasy football advice that you can handle. In the meantime, if you're listening to us on demand, head over to thefantasygreek.com, get yourself signed up for the Skybox so that you can keep up to date with all of the rankings, changes, and news and updates that are going to go on between now and Sunday. And also tweet to Ask TFG. Ask TFG. Have a good week, everybody.